Joining me now, Lesia Vasylenko. She's a member of the Ukrainian parliament, a member of the Ukrainian permanent delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the founder and chair of Legal 100, which provides assistance to service members and veterans. Great to see you finally in person.
Finally in person.
We have had a chance to meet before, including in some very, very difficult times. I was speaking of Bucha, and you and I spoke at that time when you were one of those first people to immediately go there as a member of parliament to bear witness to what you saw. And the other day when President Zelensky was asked for the worst time of the war, he talked about Bucha.
It was definitely one of the most dramatic, saddest, and also scariest days. Actually, the day when the atrocities of Bucha got uncovered, I wasn't in Ukraine. I was hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. But I was, as a woman, I was feeling scared, afraid, threatened, because I was just imagining, extrapolating, what if it was me? What if it were my daughters? What if it was anyone who I knew? And the feeling was just absolutely paralyzing, and also gave the energy to do more and to fight back harder, knowing that I would never want this to happen to either me or anyone who I love.
And that's the interesting part about it. This wasn't some distant place. This is 15 kilometers from where we are right now. This is
exactly.
a suburb of Kyiv. But I have found that the resolve that we encountered last year when this began has not weakened at all amongst Ukrainians.
No, and why would it? I mean, we know by now who we are dealing with. During the months of March, when the regions of Kyiv, Bucha, Irpin, Brodyanka, all those villages around here were occupied, we were only contemplating what we would be finding there. We knew exactly that there would be many killed. We knew exactly that buildings were destroyed. We suspected that torture chambers were set up. And then all of our suspicions came alive. We saw the raped bodies, the naked bodies of women just being left on the roads. We saw the devastation that was caused by the Russians. And that just made us push back harder. Because, you know, we only have one Ukraine. We only have one life. And we want to live this life in our beautiful Ukraine. So here we are, a year in after this escalation of aggression. 10th year of the war going on, and we are still fighting, and we will fight until the end. And for us, the end is victory of Ukraine, of course.
You have been one of those people who goes out to these other countries and speaks to not just leaders of other countries, but members of parliament, people who are going to be influential in the decision to maintain Western support for Ukraine. It's not obvious that we are where we are today. It's not obvious that everybody in Europe was going to do what they were going to do in terms of sanctions. What kind of work does that take to continue to have the world be resolute in its support of Ukraine?
Immense amounts of work. When people ask me these days, so where are you based? I have no answer for that, just because I spend so much time in all kinds of diplomatic, parliamentary missions, pretty much across the whole globe. And I try to get engaged and involved as much as possible through the media in particular. And I'm always very grateful for the communication platforms provided to speak about Ukraine, to give an overview of what is happening here on the ground, what it feels like to be Ukrainian these days, and why it is so important that Ukraine wins. It's a sort of mission that I have taken on myself. I know what I'm good at. I'm not exactly the perfect fighter on the front lines, but I know that I have the languages, I have the communication skills, and I have quite a lot of contacts, which make me a successful communicator for Ukraine. So I'm trying to make the most of it. And I think every Ukrainian through this year, especially in the first weeks of this escalation, has found a place for himself or herself, right, applying the skills they are best at, the things they do best, and making sure that every day, every minute of the day, they do something for Ukraine.
Is this where you thought we'd be? I mean, I don't know how to even ask that question, because obviously nobody wanted this war. Right. But where are we today compared to where you hoped we'd be and where you hope we'd be in a year from now?
You know, I'm a very positive thinking person and optimistic, and with rose-colored glasses a lot of the time. So actually, my hopes were that this escalation could be prevented. Actually, in the weeks coming up to this escalation, I was speaking to colleagues, well, again, across the globe, and everybody thought it really their responsibility to warn that, oh, you know, there's the Russians, they are amassing the troops, the intelligence is 100% right. My question was always like, hey, and what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And I didn't get a clear answer, not from a single country representative. There was implications that you should sit down at the table. Zelensky needs to negotiate with Putin. You need to push Zelensky as the opposition to sit down and negotiate with Putin. Crimea is a no-go. You cannot get it back. Just cede some territories and it will be fine. Which is ridiculous in my opinion. And I was just desperate. I remember this feeling of complete desperation at some points because I didn't understand. I'm talking to educated people who went to universities, who probably had A's in history during their high school days. They read about the Second World War. They know what appeasement of dictators leads to. And this is exactly the situation we're looking at here in 2022 in the 21st century. And it was like talking to a wall with people not hearing and just saying negotiate. And I'm so proud of our president today that he didn't negotiate, that he didn't take the taxi option, that he continues to ask for ammunition and for weapons and continues to be an inspiration to his people, to his army, and now also to all the other leaders across the globe.
It's going to feel good, though, in this country to get back to politics, right, where you can discuss domestic issues, because right now, every Ukrainian I've spoken to has the same view. They want to finish this. They want this war to end. They believe it will end, but it's only going to end if Russia leaves. I think President Biden said it this week. If Russia decides to end this war, the war ends. If Ukraine decides to stop fighting, Ukraine ends.
Exactly. That was clear for us back in 2014 when it all started. We were saying the same phrase, that if Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. This is existential for us. We will stop existing. I don't want to stop existing. I want to continue living as a Ukrainian in my own country, enjoying my own language, my own culture. You just spoke about the history of this place where we are right now. It's so rich. It's so beautiful. No, I don't want to be giving that up, and I shouldn't have to give that up. There's the international law, which is supposed to protect me. There's the responsibility of the international community as a whole that needs to kick in. So I'm really waiting for that effort to still grow and to still be mobilized so that Ukraine, with its armed forces here on the ground, can push back the Russians, hopefully even by the end of spring 2023. Again, I'm with my rose-colored glasses here.
Well, people have said that, though. And I mean, and your president has said he would like this to be the year that this ends. But the Polish president has said if it doesn't, there's worry that Russia will go into another country or will try these things in another place. Now, a lot of people say that's ridiculous. He's not going to put missiles into Poland or Lithuania or places like that. But people who live in these European countries really fear that that's true, that you Ukrainians are standing between an expansionist Russia and them.
The closer you are to Russia, the more you understand what Russia really is. You don't just understand, you feel it. Russia is an empire, and Putin has psychopathic dreams of rebuilding the greatest Russia ever. And for that, he needs Ukraine. That's imperative. And then he would also like to have the Baltics reattached. He would like to maybe have some territories of Poland and maybe other Eastern European countries. And the leaders of these countries, they are reading into what he is speaking when he's making these talks at the concerts he's organizing, when he's addressing his people. He's making little signals that, look, I'm not going to stop with Ukraine, and I shouldn't have to stop with Ukraine. And he won't stop with Ukraine, because as any normal autocratic dictator, if he's not punished, if he's not stopped, he is just going to see it as a green light to go on and to grab more and more.
It is great to meet you in person. Thank you for the time that you spent with us. Lesia Vasylenko is a Ukrainian member of parliament.